Okay, we're back for first of two lectures on colour and food. Lectures might also be broken up into separate videos as well, so there might be more than two videos. So check the playlist. Okay, so what have we got here? Yeah, coffee cup conundrum. Talk a little about the nature of flavour and colour. It's worth mentioning, of course, that plant colours in particular have evolved for other reasons. Butterflies and bats have an interest in them, and do some thinking about artificial colours. Okay, here's something to think about. Stop the video at the presentation and have a think about the important information food colours can give us. So I'll assume we're going to pause the video. Okay, I'll assume we've unpaused the video, having a little think about what colour tells us about food. It tells us a number of things. It tells us how fresh a food is, or if it has been cooked. We're used to foods having familiar colours. The pasta here has colours, probably coloured with carotenoids, of which more later, but it's still acceptable to most people. Note, however, these colours do not include flavour components. On the other hand, we have blue margarine. This was marked in the US in toothpaste-like tubes and was aimed at children. Happily, it died an early death. I don't know what the blue colour was, but I'm going to guess wildly it wasn't a natural colour, because there aren't actually that many blue colours in nature. Perhaps more well known is the short-lived green tomato ketchup. In taste tests where colour was hidden, this was indistinguishable from the red variety. Nevertheless, it was a marketing failure, essentially because tomato sauce, most people assume, would be red. Potatoes that changed from red to blue also failed, even though they were entirely a natural product, or one that probably, like almost everything we eat, has some selective breeding to develop its characteristics. Okay, so coffee cup conundrum. This is less of a rhetorical question than you might at first think. There is good evidence that the appearance of food can influence our perception of its flavour, as we sort of said to an extent with the green tomato ketchup. Flavour and taste are not interchangeable. Organoleptic properties, if you don't know how to spell that, look it up in the notes, are the characteristics of food that generate, it's on the slide anyway, that create an individual experience via the senses. These include taste, smell, touch, a range of other things. They act together to produce the overall sensation of eating a particular food. It's about the coffee cups. This paper is from the sadly defunct journal Flavour, which is one of my favourite journals, which has its content absorbed into other journals. The papers published are still available online and are worth a look, and you can link to them through the usual way, and you can in mine, either through the notes or through the images. The author of this paper investigated whether consumers' perceptions of a cafe latte beverage would be influenced by the colour, transparent, white or blue, of the mug from which it was drunk. They found that the colour of the mug did affect people's ratings of a hot beverage. Note the quite large difference between the perceived strengths of the two opaque mugs compared to that of the transparent one. This seems reasonable. Coffee in a normal opaque cup looks black. It is much less dark when looked at through in a transparent or semi-transparent cup. This is a classic study, in a taste test experiment in manipulating food colour and label information. 389 undergraduates at a public university in the US were assigned the task of evaluating a successful brand of powdered fruit flavour drink. Generally, the subjects found that the orange drink tasted a little bit sour, the purple one a little bit sweet, and the clear one had no significant taste. All the samples were identical, however, non-carbonated fruit drinks to which non-tasting food dyes were added. The results suggested that the colour of the drink influenced the subject's perception of its taste. And there's a quote from Garbatire and Starr. Done with American college students, which a lot of these studies are, may not be necessarily generalisable to other parts of the population, either younger or older people, which is something you always have to bear in mind with this type of study. Okay, so the nature of colour, a little bit of physics. Electromagnetic radiation travels in waves and spans a broad spectrum from long radio waves to short gamma rays. The human eye can only detect a small portion of this spectrum, which we call visible light. Radios detect a different part of the spectrum, an X-ray machine uses yet another portion. and there's the visible spectrum zoomed out, as it were. A little bit of nomenclature, mostly because you're almost bound to come up in this when you're looking at colour and food, wavelength in particular. As a form of electromagnetic radiation, visible light is characterised by its wavelength and its frequency. If we know one, we can easily calculate the others based on this little formula over here. So, for example, the wavelength of orange is around 620 nanometers. There's quite a few oranges, it has to be said. So its frequency is 4.8 times 10 to the 14 hertz. The calculations just include as an example. There's no need to worry too much about the sums. If you do need to do one of these, you can very easily find the method. Colours exist across a range of wavelengths, as I mentioned in terms of orange a moment ago. So they exist across a range of wavelengths and frequency, giving rise to the rich diversity of colours which we can perceive. So we notice a wide range of wavelengths, for example, for red, between 700 and 635 nanometers. When light falls on the substance, it can be absorbed, reflected or transmitted. See this video, click on the image or get it from the notes for a good review of these concepts, including mild abuse of gummy bears, as we would call them, jelly babies. So why are carrots orange? Sunlight contains all the wavelengths of visible light. When it forms onto a coloured surface, some of it is absorbed and some of it is reflected. In the case of a carrot, the blue-green wavelengths are absorbed and the yellow to red are reflected. Therefore, the carrot appears orange. Carrots contain this molecule at the bottom, beta-carotene, which we've mentioned before in other lectures, which absorbs light towards the blue end of the spectrum and transmits at the red-orange end. So we see carrots as being red-orange. On the subject of carrots, for a while the World Carrot Museum was the second best thing on the web, but following the sad demise of the Nordic Food Lab, it has regained its prominent status. Well worth a look for all things carrot related, and the musical instruments section is particularly recommended. Okay, molecular basis of colour. Based on the interaction of photons of light with matter. And there's sort of summary of it there. Not all electromagnetic radiation interacts with matter in the same way that visible light does. For example, radio waves will pass through most matter, including carrots, without significant interaction. However, if the photon has just the right amount of energy, it can interact with a particular molecule, causing some molecular transformation to take place. If that sounds a bit vague, well, it is. There are many possible molecular transformations that might happen depending on the wavelength of the photon and the molecule involved. But one key point is they all involve transferring energy from the photon to the molecule. Yeah, so beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is highly conjugated. That means it has an arrangement of double and single carbon-carbon bonds. And you probably remember from biochemistry, these are said to be conjugated. That's in reality, it's not alternating double and single bonds. The electrons are smeared over the whole chain of carbon atoms. So beta-carotene is highly coloured, and the key reason for this is the conjugated system of double and single bonds. Although we do draw conjugated systems as alternative double and single bonds, this isn't really true. The electrons in the system are said to be delocalized, that is, spread out along the carbon chain. So a consequence of this is that an incoming photon can take part in a large number of potential interactions with the beta-carotene molecule. This is assumed to be the reason why molecules like this carotene are highly coloured. Molecules, as we'll see, the molecules associated with colours in plants all have conjugated systems. Here's another example from the anthocyanins, of which more in the second lecture. The flavillum cation is responsible for the colours of anthocyanins and has a conjugated system. So double bond, single bond, double bond, single bond, etc., all the way around here. Here the blue and red flower have exactly the same pigment, but among other factors, such as concentrations of metals, they have slightly different pH values. So you can go from the blue, I forgot what I think that's a variety of sunflower, I think, to the red rose, using the same substance, but in this case with a different pH and minor other changes. Yeah, it used to be the best thing in the lab, the Nordic Food Lab, now being archived. You can download a gigantic PDF with all the information, but no longer available on the web. This image shows the variation of light colours of an anthocyanin pigment with different pH values, starting at low pH, more acid, over the left, and high pH, more basic or alkaline to the right. As mentioned before, plants evolve colours for their own evolutionary reasons, and they're often quite unstable, which can affect their use in food. More on this later. I think we'll have a break. We'll break this video and we'll come back to this second part in a moment.